Hey everyone, welcome to Youth Bombs. I'm Craig.
I'm Holden.
And we're the voice of young conservatives in Alachua County, taking a look at the policies of Javier Milei in Argentina and what policies he might implement if president of the United States. Holden, what is Mr. Milei's general philosophy towards government?
He thinks that the government is a parasite. He wants to abolish the state. He wants to privatize absolutely everything that he can. He says anything I can privatize, I will privatize. So he's made efforts. He's privatized the post office in Argentina. He's cutting regulations to the best of his ability. He has to work with the Congress of Argentina to pass a lot of the things that he wants to. So he's actually done a lot of convincing. Like, he stopped government pensions from going up in Argentina, and he had to convince a lot of people that that was a good idea. But he's just trying to shrink the government. He's laid off a bunch of employees. He's trying to, cut departments, cut regulations, and privatize as much stuff as possible. So that's his overall goal. And his philosophy is that he wants to make it so that everything is private. Now, he's not going to really be able to get there, really, anytime soon, most likely. But
But he wants eventually, if he could, in his ideal scenario, there is no state, there is no government.
For sure. If he could, he would abolish the state.
Okay. And what might some of his policies look like in the United States? Where do we start?
Oh God. I mean, the thing is in the United States, you have to get, I think it's 216 votes or something like that to cut whatever you want to cut. So 218, I guess. You got to have people working with you, and they have to be able to do that. And if you can't, then you can't get anything done. So unfortunately, I think if Argentina were in the United States, he really wouldn't be able to get much done, because his veto would be over. The House would override his vetoes for whatever spending they want to do. Unfortunately, he would try his best to cut government spending, to end departments. The same thing he's doing right now. But I just don't know how much success he would have.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and what kind of conditions would it take to get someone like Milei elected? Because we know we've got out-of-control spending. Things are really looking ridiculous with the federal government. It keeps growing and growing and growing. There seems to be no end to it. So are we getting closer now than ever to having someone like him in office?
Well, I mean, I don't know, because with Argentina, this was going on in Argentina before Javier Milei got elected. They receive a $20 billion IMF loan, and the new president says, look, everything's going to be great. I'm going to fix everything. The socialism wasn't the right socialism. We're going to implement this kind of socialism. They implement it. It fails. Another person gets elected. They get another IMF loan, and the fiat money goes, they can't pay it off, this fiat loan from the IMF. And then they try and make reforms that are even more socialist, and then it fails. And then they do it over and over and over and over again. And the country that had so much potential to be amazing, and that was one of the richest in Latin America, it just turned into a situation that didn't have to, thanks to the socialism that was introduced there, or that the policies that that were implemented. And finally, they have massive inflation. They're tired of it, and Javier Milei comes and says, look, I have a radical solution. And that's what it had to take in order for that to happen. Now, I don't like the way that I would have done something different if I were him. He is trying to resuscitate the peso. I would have let the peso collapse, but that's a whole nother issue. And I would have defaulted on the IMF loans and all that. But he's making legitimate reforms that would be radical from a perspective of a voter originally, or usually, but because of the just insane situation that is going on there, I think they were more willing to accept his ideas.
So does America have to get worse before we could have someone like Milei in office?
Most likely. Yeah.
Okay.
I think so. I think that if there's a massive inflationary recession in the United States, which, if they're not major reforms, is most likely what would happen based on the fiscal position and the bond market position and the FDIC position and all the other problems that fundamentally are in the United States economy right now. If we have some sort of sovereign debt crisis, inflation crisis in the United States, I think it's possible, but also it could be the opposite. More times than not, it's socialism that gets elected. So AOC might come around and say, hey guys, we need Medicare for all. The problem was all these corporations. The problem was we didn't have enough government, right? $7.4 trillion a year of government was not enough we need more, right? So we don't know, but hopefully we won't go down that path.
Yeah, and definitely a lot of disaster, seeing as how we're $36 trillion in debt. It keeps getting worse and worse. We've seen how badly things were getting in Argentina before Milei came along. What can we do to prevent a similar disaster from occurring in the United States? Because it seems like a just slow ticking time bomb that's eventually going to go off and doom us all.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good question, Craig. The thing is Javier Milei would look at the problem and he'd say, okay, Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, interest, and defense are about 3/4 of the budget. So we need to start where the needle is going to be moved, because we got to act fast, because this is a huge issue. The budget deficit is $2.4 trillion a year. So there needs to be major reforms made to government spending. And he would have to start with Social Security and Medicare. And so the voters and the general population would have to be okay with their Social Security and Medicare and entitlements going away and their pensions being cut. Are you okay with that? I mean, most people are not okay with that. So unfortunately, there's no accident that they call these programs entitlements, right? They want to make you feel like you're entitled to this money. So, and that's how they feel. And if you actually try and say, hey, vote for me so I could take away your money, it's just not a winning strategy, unfortunately. So he would have to start there. He would have to start with the entitlements. Entitlements, interest, and defense are making up over 90% of the budget. All entitlements, interest, and defense. So, I mean, it's just you'd have to cut those programs. So I don't see that really happening in a realistic scenario.
Right. And a lot of people also don't see, if they had the money for themselves in the first place, then they could have invested it, had a market level return of 10% or so a year with the S&P 500, and done much better than the return with government bonds at 2% or so behind inflation. So really not looking good there. Additionally, what would be the easiest place to cut? Like, what would be the starting point that you think could get the most consensus?
I don't know. I mean, everybody's against waste, fraud, and abuse, but where is the waste, fraud, and abuse occurring? It's occurring in the government. That's the issue. Like the Department of Health and Human Services, about 20% of their expenditures are waste, fraud, and abuse. Okay, so are you willing to cut Social Security, or are you willing to cut Medicare and Medicaid? Right? Like, most people aren't willing to do that. So we're going to continue to have hundreds of billions of dollars a year of waste, fraud, and abuse. And we could try and make the government efficient, but that's like, it's not in the real world. Like, that's not the case. The government is never going to be efficient. So it's an oxymoron. It's just not real. So it's a big fantasy. You'd have to be willing. I don't know. Like, everybody wants the spending. That's the problem. I mean, maybe the wars, like, bring the troops home. I could see maybe a consensus there, which would be good. I don't know. But still, even then, that's not enough.
So perhaps the Department of Government Efficiency wouldn't live up to your and or Milei's expectations.
Yeah, because the Department of Government Efficiency is effectively an advisory board. So it has actually no real power. It has to get Congress and the Senate to cooperate with whatever it wants to do. So is the Department of Government Efficiency going to say, hey, Social Security, that needs to go. We need to make reforms to that. Okay, cool. Everybody with me? No. No, that's not going to happen. So the Department of Government Efficiency has no chance of doing anything that's going to move the needle effectively. They have to get massive cooperation from the House, which is not going to happen. So the Department of Government Efficiency, unfortunately, is going to fail, which I hate to say, but it's just the truth.
Interesting. And do you think perhaps they'll be able to get the ball rolling on some spending cuts? Maybe, for instance, looking at Social Security, maybe they raise the retirement age, doing something perhaps without cutting benefits, but that at least gets the ball rolling a little bit to make some reforms.
Yeah, I mean, I think that they'll probably advise something like that, but that's what Project 2025 advised, right? And, Project 2025 was a mixed bag. It had a lot of good things and a lot of bad things. And one of the good things in there was making reforms to Social Security. I don't know if you remember. But Trump wanted nothing to do with that, right? He's promised to not raise the retirement age for Social Security. He's promised to do that, literally specifically. So there's so overriding Trump's veto, you got to get 66%, right? 66%. You got to get Democrats and Republicans, by and large, to agree with this. That's not going to happen.
Right.
So there's just no way this is going to get cut. unfortunately, I hate to be the pessimistic guy here about this, but I wish I could be like, okay, we got a bunch of Malays in there. You know, we would. I would know all this crap would be over. It would be amazing, but this is not. It's just not the real world.
Well, can you give us some optimism and some hope to look to?
Well, the optimism is that AI is going to significantly increase capital and productivity. The positive thing is that Trump wants to cut regulations, and that's very positive for productivity, which will increase tax revenue. He also appointed an amazing energy secretary. And so regulations in the energy industry, I expect to dramatically be decreased. And as the cost of energy falls, thanks to decreased regulation, the cost of everything will fall as well because of that. So those are two amazing things that could happen in the Trump administration: regulation cuts and for energy, and regulation cuts in general. So to the extent that we could do that, and cutting the corporate tax rate, if he could do that as well, all of those things are very, very bullish for the United States economy. Also, relatively speaking, Europe is stagnating relative to the United States economy. The United States economy is doing much better than most economies right now, at least nominally, right? On the surface, we have a lot of innovation here. You know, we have much more of an entrepreneurial culture here and all that kind of stuff. So, I mean, you know, Elon Musk is not going to Germany, right? He goes to the United States because we have Silicon Valley. You know, we have entrepreneurship culture. You know, if you fail, we don't have the same attitude that they do in Europe mostly. So, you know, that's very good.
Mm-hmm. And do you think young people our age are going to be more receptive to a Malay-style government? Because we see, for example, the people who are now retired or retiring soon, justly or unjustly, they are very afraid of anyone touching Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid.
Yeah.
So perhaps the under 30s could be a potential audience for this.
I mean, I don't know, man. There's an old saying that's like, if you're not a liberal by the time you're 20, you don't have a heart, and if you're not a conservative by the time you're 30, you don't have a head. There's something like that. And I mean, most younger people do vote Democrat, I think. So, I mean, I don't know. Like, also, younger people tend to be more open to new ideas. So maybe they'll look at the reforms made in Argentina and they'll say, hey, this is pretty cool. I don't know, man. I don't know enough about it, to be honest. But I'd like to see us move in that direction. Like, I'd like to see us look at China. All right, are their subsidies working? No. Let's look at the United States. Is Social Security working? No. Okay, let's look at Argentina. Cutting the government. Is that working? Yes, it obviously is. Can we go in that direction? Okay, amazing. Let's go in that direction. I don't know. We'll see. But it's interesting because if they knew, like, if younger people knew the Social Security problems, they would be for cutting Social Security. They'd be like, oh my God, I'm subsidizing older, richer people. Like, this is ridiculous. And it's actually in their interest, right? So I could say, hey, younger voters, by the way, you actually keep your income and save for your own retirement. You don't have to participate in some government created Ponzi scheme, you know? So, I mean, I don't know. We'll see.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. We've got a huge problem on our hands. It's not looking good, but we have to hope that with real change and real reform, that the changes can be made, that we don't have a ticking time bomb of debt, an outrageous deficit, and a continued political class that has no care for the future, that isn't interested in young people and isn't looking to make the necessary spending cuts and regulation reforms that will boost our economy and get us off the debt track. That being said, thanks everyone so much for watching. We really appreciate it. We upload 3 times a week. If you'd like to reach out to us, feel free at youthbombs@alatrarepublicans.com. And don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Thanks so much.